That one's in the middle. And what we've done is we've identified all of the historic places, landforms, houses, buildings, everything from historic Agua Fria. And when I say historic Agua Fria, I'm including everything from La Jolla Street, all the way up there from La Jolla Street, all the way down past Lopez Lane, okay? Which is actually the entire village. Historically it was, and I'll show you how that was. The third map over here is a draft map, and it's a draft of the area with some buildings and some landforms and other things on it. And it's in a draft form because we've been working on this now for about, what, 5 months, 6 months? And so what we ask when you see that, after the presentation, there are pens there. And if you see anything missing from there that you know about, pen it in. Praise it real clearly, and we'll put it in and include it. We'll make sure that if you don't have the exact location, we can always Google and get right to the exact location and make it exact so that it'll be super accurate. I've been working on the history of Agua Fria now for about a year, maybe a little over a year. And it's gone through a lot of phases. It was a 2-piece article in the June and July issue of Greenfire Times last year. And then from there, I got it into the Crónicas del Camino, or the Chronicles on the Trail journal. And what I did was I combined the two articles from Greenfire Times and did more research. And basically it's taken up half the journal. And it really opened up with Lois Mee's photograph that she did in the winter, and that's how it opens up. You know, I didn't put that on the thing, but I will eventually. I didn't have enough time.
Can we get copies of that?
This is a journal from the Trail Association called the Camino Real Trail Association, which I'm actually the publications chair. And this is published twice a year. And usually the only way to get it is if you're a member. And if you're a member, it's $25 a year and you get 2 issues. But if some of you are really, really interested in just the article itself, I can make copies of this for you. And so you can sign up maybe over here.
Is there an electronic version?
No. Well, it will eventually be on the on the website, and you can actually read it on the website.
Right.
But some people like to have the copy. If you really, really want the copy, then sign up on here, and I'll get you copies. Okay. So with that, and in mind, I'll go ahead and get started. Okay, great. And Agua Fria Across the Centuries is the title of a very brief history. And I'm calling it a brief history, even though it's 20 pages. Because the reality is that as I worked with this, it just keeps growing. There's so much history in this area that in some cases, it's right there even with the history of Santa Fe. Because just about everything that happened in Santa Fe was really, kept alive because of this village. This village is the one that produced the products, kept everything going. This is where all the agrarian, in terms of agrarian work and products and everything, there was more here than in Santa Fe. Higher up, shorter growing season. The ground was not fertile up there. It was rocky, they had a lot of problems. Down here, it was ideal. And so I'm going to talk about that. And of course, if you look on the El Camino Real map that's on the brochure, you can see kind of the connection from Cochiti San Felipe, Santo Domingo, Cochiti, La Bajada, La Ciénega, La Cieneguilla, El Alamo, to Agua Fria, and then to Santa Fe. The interesting thing about this whole history that I found is I started doing genealogies in Agua Fria, but I didn't. Then I went to La Ciénega and La Cieneguilla, and now I have an article out in the Green Fire Times on La Bajada, and all these families connect. They all connect from Peña Blanca, La Bajada, La Ciénega, La Cieneguilla. They're all connected, totally connected. The Montoyas of Peña Blanca are related to the Montoyas of La Bajada and Ciénega, Cieneguilla, and Agua Fria, and then of course those who moved into Santa Fe. So there's this string of families, and they're all interconnected. And I'm talking about agrarian families mostly. I'm not talking about businessmen and capitanes so much and other folks like that, you know, and politicians and all. I'm talking about people that worked their hands, worked on the lands, were artesanos like blacksmiths and worked in the, you know, with tack for horses and all of those different things. Those are the people I'm talking about. And I found out that I'm tied in with that my families are tied in, and I never thought they were. I thought they were just out there in Alamo and mainly in Alamo, where the Rancho de Guicu was, and Golondrinas, and that's where my family came from. And here I find that, you know, we're all connected, all the way from Peña Blanca. So, of course, pre-European Agua Fria had three pueblos. Pueblo de Pindi, which is a Tewa word meaning Turkey. So it was a village of the Turkey. Pueblo Quemado de las Cieneguitas, which is located, of course, upriver on the other side of the river. Well, from here, actually, just straight up from here, and along the river in the area where the street name is. Those of you who know the Pueblo Quemado Street, when you're going up Alameda, on your right, that's exactly where those pueblos were, and it was a string of them. And then the Pueblo de Arroyo Negro, which is up on the hill, down from Calle Nopal. So here is Pindi in 1934, and it's just down the road a ways, across from, of course, the church and the tank, everything, across the river, and there were the pens. These were the turkey pens that were dug up in 1934. And of course, as you see, there's a gentleman sitting there who is one of the crew that did all this hard work. Nowhere is he identified. It's something that is very interesting in New Mexico history, having organized the photo archives of the New Mexico archives when I was an archivist, that I'd find all these photos, and the people that took the photos were mostly Anglo. The people who they took the photos of were mostly Hispanic and Native American, but they always said, Indian woman with children, or Hispanic man with shovel. And I'm thinking, who were they? Why didn't you go up there? If you're a photographer, when I photograph things, I either jot them down or I write them on the back of the photo. I make sure I know what I'm photographing. This person has a name if I'm doing a person, or if it's a place name, or it's a landform or something, I put down the name of it and I put down the date that I take the picture. And so it's very strange for me to continue to see this, you know, and I like to know who that gentleman was, because he was involved in the excavation of Pindi Pueblo. And sure, we can talk about Stubbs, Stanley Stubbs. He was the archaeologist, and his name's all over everything. This is the guy, this is the grunt worker. This is the guy, Stanley Stubbs sat there and stood there and was the supervisor. This guy was the guy that did most of the work. And so here's another photograph that shows Pindi Pueblo in 1934, and as you can see, I don't have my pointer with me. You can see here's Atalaya Mountain up here, and there's Picacho, and then of course there's the big mountain over there. Here's the riverbed, and so you can see how rural in 1934 it was here. There were just, I mean, there were houses and ranches.
So what happened to these ruins?
What happened?
It wasn't that long ago,
They melted.
they were
Yeah.
up there in 1934.
Right, they slowly melted to the ground and nothing ever happened. They didn't.
There was a flood.
Yeah, and there was a flood, that's right,
Oh.
that's right.
But
There was a flood, and then also, the edge here of Pindi is right at the river bank, and it slowly just
He
caved
rotted
in,
away.
slowly broke away, because it was elevated. So when you look across there and you see it's kind of flat, it actually was more like a cliff there, a river edge that was tall, and Pindi was on top, so it kind of crumbled. Part of it crumbled.
this is just west of San Isidro Crossing.
Right.
And there was some huge sand and gravel operations by Mr. Kaufman in 1950. And he pretty much took everything out. So.
Yeah, so this is what happens to historic places. Pindi Pueblo, of course, we're looking at probably 1300s. However, that same site or nearby could have been an Anasazi site as far as 1000 BC, that far back. They were farming in here. So you talk about a long history. That predates anything in Santa Fe. Anything below the ground. There's nothing that old. It's all here. This is where it's all at. This is the genesis of this whole area. Las Cieneguitas Pueblos, and I say pueblos because they were a string of small pueblos. They weren't one big pueblo together. They were kind of sporadic and transitory because people would come for certain seasons. Oh, it's a good season, let's plant. Oh, it's not such a good season. Where would they come from? They either came from the pueblos up near where the Santa Fe Community Center is, which were the Tewa people that eventually moved to Tesuque. They would come down sometimes, seasonally, or yearly, or biannually, or sometimes every 5 years. It depended on the water and the snowpack and all of that as to whether they were going to be successful down here. And then there's the Pueblo de los Tres Arroyos. This is up on the hill. So early life in Pindi area, of course, Folsom. When you think of Folsom hunters, you're talking about 10,000 years ago. They actually passed through here and they hunted large game, mammoth, mastodon, giant bisons, ground sloth, all these huge animals that were coming out from the Ice Age, the end of the Ice Age. And of course they were attracted to the springs and the marshes that were here. And I know it's hard for you to think about looking out there and thinking about all these springs and marshes. Well, when the stone dam was built way up there in 1880, it basically shut off the water that was flowing here freely and regularly year after year, that fed all these springs, that fed the aquifers, that kept the springs going, that kept the marshes flowing, and kept life here. And when you look at some of the aerial photos of this area from 38 and 48, 51, you see all that lush bosque. It was still alive then. And then as soon as they built the Torreon
2-mile dam.
and 3 Mile Dam, and then the Torreon, they started digging in Torreon, there, that area there where Sangre de Cristo water has their well, that also basically stopped the flow of the underground water, that was coming down and keeping the springs alive. The hunters of the Cochise period were also attracted to the area for the cibolo meaning buffalo, and they basically drank and fed in this area as well. And they also initiated agriculture in this area. For some reason, it's missing the last sentence. Anasazi peoples arrived in the north to settle this area and farm and hunt and raise turkeys because the Anasazi people were the first to domesticate the turkey. And so even before there was the Pueblo of Pindi, the Anasazi had already domesticated the turkey. And so whoever moved here in the 1300s, whatever Pueblo's group it was, they already had turkeys with them. And so when they were building those turkey pens right away, along with all the housing. And they, of course, made permanent settlements at Pindi, and and especially at Pindi, and they planted corn, beans, and squash. They also had domesticated dogs, which they were useful partners in hunting game. And they fished for trout in the upper river, and they hunted in the mountain forest, and they also collected firewood, cut poles, and vigas in the upper regions. By the 1200s, in response to drought and new enemies and cosmic signs, they temporarily abandoned the area and moved upriver to have better access to water and game and firewood and security. Now, it doesn't mean that the river just stopped flowing. It was still flowing. It was still charging everything. It's just that I think more than anything, security was probably the biggest reason, and that they wanted to make sure they had a full season of water, to water their crops, because there were these drought periods that came and went. They also built a large new pueblo near the future Plaza of Santa Fe, and eventually that group relocated to Tesuque Pueblo as we know of it today. And the first contact they did have, the Tesuque people had, was with Coronado and then later with Espejo in 1582. With the arrival of the Spanish in 1598, no documents exist to show that the pueblos, that the colonists themselves passed through Pindi, but I think maybe their patrols did. They patrolled in this area. They went a little further from La Cieneguilla, because what they ended up doing is the Pueblo guides that were taking them up further north basically guided them along La Cañada Ancha and then up to La Ciénega and La Cieneguilla pueblos, and then on to Oenge, Capoenge, and then Oque-Oenge. So those three pueblos I'm talking about are San Ildefonso pueblos, Santa Clara Pueblo, and San Juan pueblos. And in July of 1598, they arrived in Oque-Oenge. Here's a sketch map of the Santa Fe land grants, and of course it's very hard to see them, so that's why I'm going to explain them in the next thing. But these were the land grants that were here in the late 1600s and the 1700s, and this is the only map that really shows them. And I'm still searching. I still think there's another map out there that's going to come to light. It's going to give us more information. Before there was a Santa Fe, there was a paraje here in Agua Fria. A paraje is a stopover. It can be like a stop where you rest, you water up, you water the horses, you water the stock, you camp, you stay for a while to rest, and then you go on. Oñate, although he didn't do it here, he did it a little further down. He did it in probably La Ciénega or La Cieneguilla. By 1607, Juan Martinez y Montoya, in a document that we had to purchase from a London bookstore of all places, they had these documents. And the state of New Mexico, basically, I wanted to issue a replevin act on them, a state historian, but it wasn't going to work internationally. And so anyway, the British somehow got their hands on our documents, and eventually they were purchased back for I don't know how many thousands of dollars. But now they're back in our hands and at the Museum of New Mexico archives. And what they showed there is that Juan Martinez was talking about this place where they stopped on the way in. And he said, el haber hecho en Santa Fe. And really what he was talking about is that there actually was a place called Santa Fe. But we're not sure if it was here, okay? Because here they didn't have a name for this place yet. Okay, this was Pindi Pueblo, and Las Ciénegas, Las Cieneguitas pueblos, and Tres Arroyos pueblos. So we don't really know whether it was called that here or whether it was someplace up above. That's something we don't know yet. We're still researching on that, and that's as far back as 1607. Francisco de Madrid and his wife Sebastiana Cáceres, they arrived in Santa Fe in 1603 with their 10-year-old son Francisco, who was a chirionero de carros, which means he was a two-wheel cart driver at 10 years old. This man, the young Francisco, the son of Francisco de Madrid and his wife Sebastiana, in his 50s, he was a sargento mayor, and he was married to Maria de la Vega Marquez, and he was living in Quemado. So this is the first name that the Spanish gave this area. They gave Agua Fria. They called it Quemado. And they were referring to the Pueblo Quemado, okay? But there were many burnt pueblos all over the place. And so I would say that they named it after the Pueblo Quemado de las Cieneguitas. So that makes it more specific. In 1644, their son Roque, who I think some of you have heard of, Roque Madrid, who was a capitan under de Vargas, he was born here. He was born here in 1644. So talk about the history going that far back. Then you look at the land grants in the Agua Fria area. And here's just a few of them. They're not, I haven't listed all of them, nor have I researched every single one of them. But these are ones that I'm able to put, some of them I'm able to put dates on because of documents. Roque Madrid, 1692, de Vargas gave him a grant. But his father already had a land grant, of which he was born in, here in Quemado, even before that, in 1644. So it goes way back, but then it was rewritten again in 1692. Juan Lucero de Godoy, sometimes spelled with a Y, but on the land grant documents it's with an I. 1693. His land was mostly all this northern part of the river, more on the north side of the river, running from about Frenchie's Park all the way to a little bit below Frenchie's Park, all the way to Rosario Cemetery. He had a chunk of land. Luis Mayes, 1690s. His land was very much located in what would later be called Rancho El Pino. Okay? And that's the area around where Ecoversity is, all the way down to Siler Road. Siler Road all the way up to Ecoversity, including Frenchie's Park. That's Rancho El Pino. Simón Nieto purchased in 1707. He purchased land from Gil Tomé, and that was land within that Rancho El Pino as well, as it started to be broken up into smaller pieces. Pedro Gallegos, you know where the Gallegos lived, Gallegos Lane, all that area, that's Pedro Gallegos. That's where he had his land grant. And that's within the El Pino, Rancho El Pino as well. Salvador Chuleta also had land a little bit further down, closer to Siler Road. Tomas Tapia pretty much took over everything that the Godoy grant had, but only up until about Nopal, Calle Nopal. So we had Calle Nopal running all the way on the north side, running all the way down here to about Siler. Gregorio Garduño had the other side of the strip, way back, all the way down before these purchases started taking place. Actually, these purchases further down here. Gregorio Garduño. Felipe Tafoya, he had that upper part from La Jolla Road all the way down to Frenchie's Park. And then Domingo Valdez had the other side of the river, part of the other side of the river, and then he also had some south of Felipe's. And Bernardo Miera y Pacheco purchased in 1758. And this is interesting because Bernardo Miera y Pacheco, Tomás Velez Cachupin, who was the governor at that time, made him alcalde of Pecos. So he was alcalde of Pecos. So what's he doing out there? Well, it turns out he was a cartographer and an engineer. All the maps that I use from the 1700s are his maps, starting from the 1758 map, the 1760, the 1776, 1778, 1779. He mapped out all of the provincias de Nuevo Mexico, which included Utah, Arizona, all the way to California, and all of New Mexico as we know it, and part of Texas. So this is the man, the cartographer, famous cartographer. There's a book written about him. What's his name? John Kessel just wrote a book about him. And then there's the Cristobal Nieto story. When he was 29 years old, he He went on a trading trip with his brother to Paso del Rio del Norte. And I forgot the del Norte. In 1680. 1680, doesn't that tell you something what was going on in 1680? The Pueblo Revolt, right? August 10th it started. Meanwhile, his father and mother and sisters were killed by the Tanos in an attack on Galisteo, from Galisteo Pueblo, in the village there. They were killed. He hears news in El Paso about the revolt where his wife and his children, he thought, had perished. And it turns out they hadn't perished. They were actually taken captive by the Oquehuengue Pueblo, a Pueblo man, and he took them up to Oquehuengue, and that's where they were rescued by none other than Roque Madrid. And so, a year later, Cristobal was united with his family. They took them all with 2 additional children who were half Tewa from Pueblo de Oquehuengue. And by 1700, Cristobal came back to Santa Fe. At that point, he was a soldier. He enlisted in the Sonora wars, okay, down south. And then he eventually made his way back up north, where he was given, by Vargas, was given a land grant just about a block west of the San Miguel Mission. Now, of course, his family grew, and he had a lot of kids. It was impossible. Where they were, it was maybe about 4 acres of land, and it just wasn't enough to maintain a family. So basically, his son, Simon, married into a family that had land, and that was, he married Francisca Mays, who was Luis Maes' daughter, who had land here in Pueblo Quemado. And so he purchases land adjacent to that, and that's Rancho El Pino, which is pretty much this huge piece of land, probably 600 acres that he had. And here it is on the map. This is a land grant map from the 1890s when the Court of Private Land Claims took place. And as you can see, if you look at it, here is what we call the so-called Santa Fe League. Right? I call it so-called because it was illegal from the very day that it was knocked down. Here's where the line is. Here's Frenchie's Park right here, and then the river runs like through here like this. And so this is Frenchie's Park, and this is Ecoversity property over here, and here's where the church is, Agua Fria, and then all the way down to about Lopez Lane. So this is Rancho El Pino took up a lot of area as a land grant. In the White's map of Santa Fe in the 1890s, which is the one over there that you can look at in a negative way, it's actually white on black. This one's actually black on white, and I know it's very hard to see. It outlines properties in this section here, this section right here, where there were some major changes. Here's a section of Agua Fria. This is eastern Agua Fria. Here's the church right here. So basically eastern Agua Fria all the way to the church. Okay, so here's this Rancho El Pino area again, right here. Here's the Santa Fe Indian School property. So it stops here. I don't know why they didn't keep going with this map. It would really lend some light to a lot of things that were going on here. But Agua Fria in the 1800s, most of southwestern Agua Fria land remained intact with the Montoyas. They were very large landowners, as well as the Romeros, Amarante Romero, and his ancestors. The Tapias, not from Tomas Tapia came a whole slew of Luis Tapia, and one after the other, one generation after the other. I've traced them to Luis Tapia and Benito Tapia, who lived here on Agua Fria Street up above, just across from Gallegos Lane. And then the Gallegos from Pedro Gallegos, the Dimas, I'm sure many of you have heard of the Dimas, they had land here as well. Vacas, Velardes, Ortiz, Mayes. And there's many more. I'm slowly kind of listing them from that map, but it's really hard to read. And then the eastern part was being bought up at an alarming rate by speculators at that point. Here's Agua Fria Village in 1912. Now, of course, that's looking north, and of course you can't see everything. Of course, back then they didn't have these what do you call them?
Panoramic.
Hovercraft with a
So
camera.
where is this?
Video. This is looking probably on the north side of the river, and where there must have been, very close to San Isidro Crossing. This is very close to San Isidro Crossing. That's the Camino Real. That's the Camino Real right in. It's very close to there. Looking north, northeast.
North, not south of the river?
It would cross. It meandered, and as the river did the same thing. Kept
Because the
changing
river's not
course.
where it was originally.
Yeah, well, it was
They're
close
down-
to the river, but not that close. And then it would get cut off. The river would change course and cut off a piece of it, and they would have to move it a little bit further this way or that way, whichever, So it kind of meandered as the river meandered. Here's a house in Agua Fria. All the photos of houses in Agua Fria, I'm only showing you one, but they were all with adobe. They were all with tapias around them. Well built. They were built to last forever. They were 3 feet thick. All of them were just incredible. And notice how this little orno is built into this one.
Yeah.
Isn't that pretty cool? When they built the orno into the tapia. Here's a corridos de gallo. Okay, how many? All of you know what a corridos de gallo are, right? Everybody?
Yes, no,
So I don't have to explain?
no, I don't know.
Oh, corridos de gallo. My great grandfather won this thing all the time. He was the jinete. He was not the vaquero. He was the jinete, the horse whisperer, one with the horse. But as you can see here, this horse rider, see him down here? He's reaching right now for the gallo's head, right there. Okay? And he has to stay on the horse. He's got to rip off the gallo. So whoever took this picture must have probably taken a series of pictures, because imagine back then how hard it was. This is about 1900, and you got to click that picture right away. It's very hard. There's movement going on here, and how he did it, he really got lucky. He really got lucky on this photo, because you're going full tilt, and then you have to reach down and pull the rooster out by the head, and without falling off of the horse. And that's what a corrido.
So do you think they originally did this with turkeys?
It would have been too easy with the long neck.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it would have been too easy. Here's the church. This is my favorite photo of San Isidro. I don't know why. It inspires me. I love it. It's just so simple, and it's so, with the tapia and everything, just really incredible.
Are you from Agua Fria?
No, I'm close to Agua Fria.
You just have an interest in it? So-
Well, I have family here
Uh-huh.
in Agua Fria. So it's like, even though I wasn't born in Agua Fria, I was born in Santa Fe, and it was by accident, because actually I should have been born on the ranch out on San Jose del Vado on the Pecos. But my dad had to rush my mom in, and I got born 1 month early.
But
So-
this picture, it looks like are they building the church right here?
No,